I've been sent to Australia on a mission to film the Aborigines and to try and understand their future in Australian society. This is my first journey to visit the Aussies. I can't wait to meet my first Aborigines, but in Sydney, the descendants of the first inhabitants of the island are nowhere to be found. Tell me, do you know where I can find the Aboriginal people?
Where can you find Aboriginal people? You can find some in the city areas. In Sydney, for example, they're in the areas around Redfern, but a lot of Aboriginal people also live in the Outback parts of Australia, particularly in the Northern Territory, in the northern part of Queensland and in Western Australia.
Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory and also in Sydney.
There aren't very many in Sydney, but a lot in the far north of Queensland.
Aboriginal people usually outside the main cities is probably the best bet, but further north.
Geographically, the most you'll find will probably be they prefer to be out on the land, a lot of them.
There are around 390,000 Aborigines in Australia, and that accounts for only 2% of the total population. The Northern Territory is the only Australian state where they have a significant presence. In the Northern Territory, the Aborigines account for 30% of the population. So this is the region I decide to head to. After a long journey of almost 4,000 kilometres, I finally arrive in the small town of Katherine. My first impression upon arrival is of a people completely lost in a white man's world. What's happened to them? The history of the country will one day acknowledge that the white settlers denied the Aborigines a lot of their land. They killed many Aborigines, deported others, and deprived them of their rights. What do they have left? I was advised not to trust my first impressions, and to go and see Tommy in Beswick, who can tell me about his people.
One time there was a son of a witch doctor. He went hunting in the hills and at sunset like this. He hunted until he couldn't see no more, but the hills have already parted. And the mimes got this person and took them into the hills, in the cave where they live. And there they sang and they danced. And he didn't want to come back. But the witch doctor from the village, he went down, he sang to the ground and his hair grew like a vine, went around the son's arm. And he sang, and the power of that song pulled this person out of that. As we, in life, we are so easy to please, with alcohol and things like that. And we're like that young hunter who's gone into the caves of the rivers. But there's no more witch doctors to sing the songs. However it is, destruction is with alcoholism everywhere. These are beautiful people, and I've seen that change. They were beautiful women. Now they're all busted up, twisted. What happened to my sister? We have to paint, we have to sing, we have to dance. Because when the government men come one day and say, can you sing? We're going to say, sit down, we'll show to you, we'll sing. It means a lot in this whole country, all of Australia, all the Aboriginal people should wake up. Seriously, wake up. I can let him dance when you were drunk, true? You mustn't do him like that. You're going to have fun tonight.
Tommy and his wife Fleur are organising a corroboree tonight, a traditional Aboriginal ceremony.
I like the way you think you can do the door from it.
Tell her that she'll take over.
Oh, sure. Oh, not at all.
I'm dancing.
I've learned that when they first came face to face with them, the Aborigines mistook the white settlers for spirits. In order to confront these spirits as equals, the Aborigines covered their own bodies in flour or white powder. This custom lives on today in every Aboriginal ceremony. To the Aborigines, white is the colour of death and spirits.
Burbuck Boone was preparing some wood for the fire in order to provide warmth and light for his family. He added some wood to the fire because he had noticed that one of the logs had hollowed out and a family of termites was busy nibbling away at the tender wood at the center of the log. Since he didn't want to hurt the termites, he brought the hollow log up to his lips and began to blow. The family of termites was thrown out into the night sky, and they formed the Milky Way and the stars, and they lit up the entire countryside. And then, the vibrations of the didgeridoo blessed Mother Earth for the first time. Its vibrations would protect the Earth and all of the spirits of the Dreamtime for the rest of eternity. At the beginning of time, in the Dreamtime, there were no contrasts and the world was completely flat. Then some creatures who were half man, half animal emerged from the earth. These beings, our ancestors, moved around and hunted and fought, and in doing so, they modeled the earth. They created the contrasts in the landscape. They created the rivers and the plains, the trees and the dunes, the animals and the plants. They created water, air, and fire. Exhausted by all of their activities, they then returned into the earth. Sometimes, the spirits transform themselves into a rock, a tree, or other parts of the landscape. When this happens, they become sacred places, which only the men and the women who have been initiated have the right to see.
Tommy has explained to me that when the women of Beswick go to collect the leaves from the pandana trees, they never return to the same tree twice in 1 year. This is because it's important to give the tree some time to regenerate. In order to colour the fibres, they dig out the roots of a shrub to make a yellow dye, and the roots of an onion to make a red dye. When they mix these two, they can obtain a large spectrum of colours that are 100% natural.
We do not own the land owns us. The earth is our mother, the starting point where it all began. Dig up a little bit of the earth, and you will see that it represents where we came from and where we are destined to end. The earth is our food, our soul, our spirit, our identity. We have no borders, no enclosures, no property rights. We belong to the earth. She is our spiritual world.
fibres of the pandana trees are dried in the sun, and then they're soaked in the dyes. The fibres are used to make baskets and mats. The many detailed movements of these women have not changed at all for hundreds of years. Gambling has been increasing in popularity in the majority of Aboriginal communities. Everything is shared between members of a family, including money. I have come to understand that the winner rarely keeps the money he wins. The losers borrow the winnings, making the games endless. These people make me feel comfortable and welcome. I've even considered sitting and playing cards with them. Beswick is 110 kilometres away from the nearest town. The supermarket here does not sell any alcohol. There is only one authorised bar in the village, and it's only allowed to sell alcohol for 2 hours at the end of each day. Consumption is limited to 6 cans of beer a day for men and 4 cans a day for women. This doesn't prevent alcoholism, but it does reduce it.
It's easy to get addiction. People get bored in the bush. You're granted if you can paint and you can play didgeridoo. You're granted because you can do things. Here you have to create things for people, and the majority of the people can't do anything. We have a problem with reading and writing and mathematics, and the system of the white world seems to fail us. And the further you learn about it, you learn about the bureaucracies and the government departments and people who try to look after you. Why should they look after us all the time, you know? It doesn't work. And I've been away for a long time in Melbourne, living in Melbourne, like being in exile, because I've done a film. And some of my family had said that I've been a traitor in our cultural world to become famous. And that was very painful. We get through all sorts of dilemmas. Look, I'm an Aboriginal man married to a white woman, you know, and very interesting. The white people look at us, you know, and the black people look at us. And they wonder. Some wonder, why this beautiful white woman going with this black woman?
We have an Aboriginal
you know?
police.
You hear them. But you learn to be strong. And if I drink, I'm not worthy of anything. If I don't drink, I can have anything I like. I am not with this. I'm not really classical, but you learn things, you know. I've had a lot of people, French people in Melbourne, who had time to teach me music and guitars and stuff like that. Francois Bernard. Feelings. And it's nice, you know, and Francois taught me all this. And he taught me a lot of things that I can stand on my feet. Feeling ain't easy tonight when you look up in the skies. When no love in vain, come on, tear it down. started changing in the night times.
The people of the Tiwi Islands, located at the extreme north of the territory, were the first people to have had any contact with the European travellers at the beginning of the 19th century. Upon my arrival on the island of Melville, I met two men, Martin and Marius. They still practice turtle fishing, an ancient tradition, and they've asked me to come along for the ride. The Aborigines of the Tiwi Islands are among the last people in the world who are still allowed to hunt turtles. Since the turtle has escaped them, Martin and Marius have to settle for some recently laid turtle eggs. The Tiwi Islands, which are around the size of Cyprus, have only 2,300 inhabitants. The waters surrounding the islands are filled with sharks, rays, crocodiles, and turtles. Since the animal and marine life is plentiful, it is hard to convince the Tiwis to give up hunting endangered species.
Slow.
Black people cry, and the white people wonder why. Some really try to understand the strange human, the Aboriginal man. Some wonder, what is it this man wants? Is it to relive the past with tribal hunts? What is it, this thing they call the Dreamtime? Come, don't be afraid of what you might find. Look, white leaders, do you see a broken race? Then look again. What do you see in their face? Look closely now, at the sparkle in their eye. With justice, equality, and land, no longer will black people cry. His challenges are many. He will soon be a warrior again. Let him make the first step.
Short.
We live on animals on the land. We eat them, and on the sea. We've been eating them for a long time. Our grandfathers, great-great-grandfathers, they taught us from generation to generation to eat the food on the land and on the sea. We are limiting the catch. In one hunting, maybe 2 is the limit, 2, 3. But we know in some places where there's lots of turtles, they get maybe 3, 4, you know. But people are aware of the turtle. The numbers are going down. Hi, man. Hey, it's important because it's our way of life now.
In the place of this supermarket, there used to be a very particular boarding school. In 1911, under a law intended to protect the indigenous population, mixed-race babies and children were forcibly taken away from their Aboriginal families and placed in boarding schools run by white people. The goal of the authorities was to ensure that these mixed-race children adopted European values so that they could later be assimilated into white society. These people are known as the children of the lost generation. Martin was one of these children.
I came here in 1945 during the mission days. Yeah. Very hard life I had here.
After the war?
People came after the war, yeah. Oh, there was a lot of us. 400 girls, 500 boys from all parts of Australia and Northern Territory. Yeah. I went back myself. Then I seen a friend then in Tendon Creek. I knew him from Darwin. I knew him from Darwin. And he knew my family. He knew my mother. He knew my father was. So.
And he told you?
He told me.
You family
then
there?
I went with him to Alice Springs. Then he told me, "This is your son. This is your lost son." See my mother, my grandmother, my grandfather. Yes. Very happy.
And do they come to visit you sometimes?
No. No.
And you? Have you visited them several times?
Several times, yeah.
From 1911 to 1980, up to 100,000 mixed-race children are said to have been taken away by the Australian government and placed as orphans in white families or institutions. The boarding school that was once here has left a bitter taste in the minds of the Tiwis. This is despite the fact that these children were raised in the heart of an Aboriginal community. Today, the governmental authorities and the church have made amends by asking for the forgiveness of the Aboriginal people. But in my opinion, the psychological and at times physical injuries of the children will take a long time to heal.
Kakadu wetlands are renowned internationally for their incredibly high biodiversity values, and they're listed under the World Heritage Convention. In the 1970s, the Australian government essentially asked the Australian people and also the Aboriginal people in Kakadu whether they wanted mining to go ahead at Ranger or not. The traditional owners said, we don't want mining to go ahead on our country. And yet the federal government said that the Aboriginal people's opposition to mining should not be allowed to prevail, and they overruled that opposition. Well, Aboriginal people have very strong links to country, and their identity is formed through their relationship with their country. So when you take away their country, you're essentially taking away and attacking their identity. Since mining started in Kakadu, there's been a huge escalation in social problems amongst the Aboriginal communities there. Really serious problems with alcohol, serious health problems, very poor levels of educational attainment. As most people know, uranium is a very dangerous substance, and when it's mined, it creates radioactive waste that remains toxic for thousands of years afterwards. So in any uranium mining, there's always the possibility that some of that radioactive waste will actually leave the site, the mine site, and move to downstream areas. Just about every single mine in Northern Australia has lost some contaminated materials to the external environment at some stage because they haven't been able to manage the huge quantities of water that fall on sites in the wet season every year. And in fact, at Ranger, there's a legacy and a history of contaminated materials moving off the mine site and into the environment. And in fact, every year, the mining company dumps water, which is of a fairly poor quality, into the national park, which actually poses a risk for traditional owners who live downstream and who eat many of the animals and species that live in the wetlands. And obviously the radiation accumulates in the environment, and there's a real risk there that they will be exposed to radiation levels that they wouldn't have been exposed to if the mine hadn't happened.
At Ranger, 2 million tonnes, literally a mountain of minerals, are mined every year. These 2 million tonnes are then treated in sulfuric acid. 5,000 tonnes of uranium, packed in sealed containers, are exported every year. The press release of the mining company claims that they produce 8% of all uranium in the world, and that they are the major suppliers to the nuclear power plants in Asia, the Americas, and Europe. Of the mine's 180 employees, around 30 are Aborigines or of mixed race. The management takes great pride in showing me the training program that has been developed to improve the skills of Aboriginal employees.
Receiving mine shift supervisor, vehicle 72 entering the mine area with 4 people going down to the bottom of pit 3.
Fit at the moment, Greg?
That'd
be correct.
Gail Tambling is 23 years old. She has signed a 2-year training contract and is employed in the environmental department. Her job is to ensure that rainwater is properly drained from the bottom of the mine pit and channeled to the retention ponds. Every time she has to leave the mine, Gail has to wash her car so that no trace of radioactive waste or dust leaves the site. Another aspect of her job is to take samples from the retention ponds in order to measure the purity of the water and its radiation levels. Her answers to my questions do not reveal much. I have the feeling that she is aware of the risks that the mine places on the environment, but that she would just rather not say anything about them. She's clearly got too much to lose. Gail is separated from her husband, and she lives with her son and her young sister in a villa that has been provided for her by the mining company.
Hello.
I was running down.
You shouldn't have.
I did.
Hello, Elizabeth. Hello. Most of my life I've been living in the city, and living in the city meant for me to go to school, and yeah. So just only when I had school breaks, whenever we had vehicles, we'd go out and see our country. But it wasn't a regular basis. My grandparents, they're from both marriages, are sort of passed on. I didn't have time to learn through them, but just a little. But whereas I'm learning today, it's through my older brothers and sisters and my mum. Sort of my dad's passed on 2 years after I was born. Well, I hope me joining the workforce and sort of being out there, getting employment for myself to show my son, my younger sister, They can actually do that, go out there and get a job for themselves. That's why I just come back from school holidays from camping out and all they've done is just hunting bush foods, fishing.
I'm having bogey. I'm going to chuck myself in.
Op mijn achterin.
Whoa.
The mine at Ranger will be exhausted by 2007. There is a plan to open a new mine in Jabiluka, 20 kilometres to the north of Ranger. This has been blocked by a massive uproar from the Aboriginal community, who own the land. But for how long will they be able to resist the opening of a new mine? Do Aborigines really have any alternative but to be evicted from their land for economic reasons beyond their control? Many have already been forcibly integrated into the white community. A growing number of Aborigines are now living in big cities like Darwin. I want to know how they have integrated and how the Australian government has helped them. Marie is 21 years old. She is currently doing a 2-year internship earmarked for Aborigines with ABC Radio, the state radio station.
Down there, and he's got a compass.
At the moment, she is responsible for checking the quality of broadcasts, the switch from national to local programming, and she also works with the report crews of the station.
Is obviously added on to that stamp duty. Overall, you could be up for 40 to 50,000 in your lifetime of stamp duty.
That's a bit of a trap, isn't it?
It is very much a trap, and people, again, when they refinance to buy another house...
I've been asked actually to do stories of an Indigenous nature because I'm an Indigenous person or of that origin. And I find it as a privilege actually because I can relate to them pretty well and they can relate to me pretty well.
Interested in... Your parents do not share their culture?
It's so much, I think there's so much of a difference when you have confidence. You feel much better about yourself, you feel so much better about showing people your home and showing people your families and walking out with them and doing things with them.
Marie has invited me over to her house for dinner. In addition to their daughters and numerous small children, Marie's parents' house is almost always crowded with aunts, cousins and nephews who randomly drop in. Marie's father is white and her mother is an Aborigine. They met in the Aboriginal community of Daly River. They seem very much together.
My mum, she's done a lot for us. She's done so much. She's reared up 5 of us and she's lost a child and, you know, coming from an Aboriginal family and moving up here for our education into a more Western world and out of her comfort zone was something really special, I reckon.
At the table, we ask you, Lord, to bless this food and to bless us. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
Well, now that I'm growing older, I probably see myself as an Indigenous person. But when I was, say, only a year ago or 2 years ago, it was harder for me because I'm a bit lighter skinned than, like, you know, Aboriginal people. They expect them to be, you know, a real dark colour, obviously. So I didn't really know where I fit, basically. I didn't know what I should say to people when they asked me. Like, sometimes I'd get people ask me if I was from New Zealand. When I was in Canada and Toronto for this World Youth Day, someone came up to me and started speaking in Spanish or something, and I had no idea what they were talking about, and they realised, and I said I was from Australia. But, like, yeah, it's really hard sometimes for a while. Like, I remember when I was applying for the ABC traineeship, I didn't know whether I should apply because it said Indigenous people, and if I went to do an interview there, would they recognise me as being an Indigenous person? I think the whole stolen generation issue and kids being taken away from their homes, from their families, was such a terrible thing. In that way, it really annoys me and it frustrates me that things happen like that. I think we have to move on at some point, I think.
Just sit down.
You know, I've learnt from different ways because I've wanted to know. Like through my paintings, I guess. Like I paint a little and try and learn, you know, the styles of the art.
I met Janet in an art gallery that I wandered into in Darwin. Aboriginal art has been increasing in popularity and is really about to explode on the art scene.
And collecting seeds. I have people coming in and they ask me what's the story is about and what's the painting is about, and I tell them what the story is. My mum paints, and my two aunties and my uncle paints, and my grandmothers as well, and my brother Malcolm paints, and my sisters as well, and myself, and my daughter as well. My two aunties, they're the ones that taught me, and they gave me all the stories and designs, and they took me to my grandfather's and great-grandfather's site, and they told me, you know, the story of this one. And because it's really important, and they're the ones that have the knowledge to pass on the stories and the dreamings. My father's dreaming is serpent snake, and I also paint fire and lightning and thunder, different animals as well too. They're the totems of my fathers and my aunties. And I also paint my grandfathers, my mom's dad, because I am the custodian for my mums and my grandfathers.
Oh, that's the really big Janet going to Germany. Yep. Oh, right, I see the problem, yep. Of all the artists that we have, Janet is the most popular. And her paintings go all over the world. Not only to Australians, but they go to Europe and America. With Aboriginal artists, their stories are handed down through initiation ceremonies or age grading ceremonies. They cannot just paint any stories. They can only paint the stories that they own. The Aboriginal people, once they have their money, they share it with the rest of their family. So today I could give them $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000, and tomorrow they'll have nothing. Janet is looking after 5 or 6 children. She's got quite a few people there staying at her place at the moment. I think altogether there's probably 10 people staying at her place. But I have seen more. I've seen 15 people there.
Janet's mother's song tells the story of the painting, which is about the history of her clan. Every time the Aborigines express themselves, either through their art or through their language, I can sense all the richness and the strength of their culture, and the pride that the older members feel towards it.
I teach my daughters and nieces to paint too, because it's really important. They have to, learn about our culture. Yeah, it's important for our kids to learn both ways, our language and English as well too.
People have spoken to me about an institute on the outskirts of Darwin, which trains Aboriginal adults from all over the Northern Territory. Here, students select their courses from subjects as varied as silkscreen painting, comparative theology, and penal law.
We train adults, so we're training the parents and encouraging the parents in ways of living in two societies. And we're hoping with the learning that we're giving them in leadership will help them with their children in completing education or staying in education and maintaining their culture. I've spoken to students that have come in and have had that challenge within themselves. They want to keep their culture and they want to follow God. Some people feel like they have to leave their culture and just follow God. Others have worked it out that they can actually work together, they can be together. Christianity and their culture can work together.
In my opinion, Clementine really stands out as a pillar of strength and courage. She came to the Institute to increase her knowledge of the Gospels and to be able to better participate in her parish. Clementine especially likes to read passages from the Bible that have been translated into Tiwi, her language. Steve Fletcher is the chaplain of the main Aboriginal parish of Darwin at St Martin of Porus. I met with him to find out what he thinks of the spirituality of the Aborigines.
The Western world is learning about spirituality, or maybe relearning. And I think these days when anyone who works with and amongst Aboriginal people is often learning as much as they are, sort of giving out anything. They're learning as much from the people, certainly about spirituality.
At the weekends, Clementine goes back to the Tiwi Islands with her two grandchildren, Lauren and Clancy, who go to school in Darwin. Last night, Clementine and I talked for ages and a real rapport developed between us. She insisted that I join her on her trip to the islands. She wants to show me that it is possible for the Aborigines to bring together the white world, a world of materialism and Christianity, and the traditional world of her ancestors.
Thank you.
My father wasn't Christian. He didn't want us family to be baptized, to be a Christian. One day, my father got sick. He passed away when Mommy was pregnant for me. Mom bought me traveling by canoe. A little baby, I was about a week old. And she brought me up here. And she told Father that she wanted to be baptized and She said, I want my daughter to be baptized, and I want to be baptized too, and all my children.
Clementine pays a visit with her aunt to her uncle's tomb. The Tiwis decorate every tomb with 4 totem poles that the in-laws of the deceased have the responsibility of painting and carving. These totem poles are raised to protect the dead from evil spirits.
We think about people too. We know that their spirits are always with us.
Next to the church, I see 4 totem poles surrounding an isolated tomb. This represents the tomb of Christ. Even as Christians, the Aborigines never completely give up their traditional beliefs. Clementine feels responsible for her many grandchildren. Today, they are taking a trip 20 minutes into the centre of the island. Somehow, Clementine has found a balance between the white world and the traditional Aboriginal world, and she is trying to share this with her family and her community. Her strength of character is striking.
It is very important for my grandchildren to learn in TV culture and God's way, and put them together, and make it into one.
Clementine is a modern Christian. After a particularly hot day, there is a place on the island where she likes to go to drink a couple of cold beers.
Down the line, there's a musical note in the whistle whine, and I'll soon be back in the mustering camp again. With red-hot reins tugging in my hands on a big camel, gonna be so grand. Well, Mickey makes a break from the mop on the golden lane. I got my old corn pop and a saddlebag, Willoughby spurs, and I've rolled the swag. I got a old guitar and a ticket on the westbound train. Feel at ease in my stockman suit, in my curly hat and my high-heeled boots. In a day or two I'll be back on the Golden Lane. In a day or two I'll be back on the Golden Lane.
In Clementine's village, fewer and fewer people know how to speak Tiwi. This is especially true among children and young people who are more comfortable speaking and understanding English. Fortunately, the young people can still learn from their elders who sing in Tiwi about the origins of their tribes and of the Aboriginal people. Clementine is telling the story of a hunter who is stuck between 2 worlds. The ruthless world of the white people who came from beyond the seas, and the gentle and peaceful world of the Aboriginal clans, who are threatened by doubt and troubled by these new values introduced by the white people. The hunter awaits for his people to regain faith in themselves. He waits for them to become proud once more, to sing again, to paint, to dance, and to celebrate. In this way, his people might once and for all banish their evil spirits and get rid of the temptations that cloud their minds. And he will become, once again, a strong and loyal warrior, like he once was in the beginning, in the Dreamtime.